Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to be very brief because I want this team to get introduced and to experience Sherry. That's the best way I can describe her passion for this topic. I know that RPA has been a huge top of mind in all the conversations that I've been having, with my Deloitte clients and also in forums and conferences. And so we thought it would be good to give you a breath of fresh air as to, it's not all about RPA. There's a lot of cool stuff going on around cognitive that, kind of is immediately in your future if it's not already. And so with that, Nicole, if you could advance to the next slide, I would appreciate it. Sherry, I'll let you do your own introduction if you'd like to come on.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, here we are. Okay, so quick introduction. I know we only have like 15 minutes, and I want to share some of the future thinking beyond RPA. My background, briefly, computer engineering person, longtime skills in computer engineering, went on to have a beautiful career at IBM Watson as one of the original Watson people, as a distinguished engineer. First person to bring a cognitive intelligent assistant to Africa. I ran Middle East, Africa, and Turkey for IBM Watson in like 2012, I think. So I used these intelligent assistants in a contact center space. Imagine an agent using a virtual assistant to converse with a customer. And the questions that we were answering at the time are questions like, will you pay my insurance claim? If so, how much? If not, why not? Very complex questions. And so we built the early days of the virtual assistant. And then sometime around 2015, I went into Silicon Valley and invented neural chat and a neural intelligence platform. So imagine many solutions that you could use. I apologize, I'm getting a call. Many solutions that you can use to access intelligent assistants. So about a year ago, I think it was the first week in November, I joined Deloitte. And since then, I've been doing amazing work on what I'll say is conversational, let me hang that up, conversational process automation and conversational AI. So basically the way I would describe the work that I've been spending a lot of time on, or creating voice virtual assistants, is having conversation be part of the process. So imagine you're kicking off work, and your work it could be robotic or robotic process automation, and then somewhere in that cycle of your work, a human needs to speak to make the process continue. So the human is involved in the loop and speaks naturally to the process, making a higher cognitive decision to continue the process along its way. And it can continue having the human do the work, or can go back into a robotic process automation. So that's where my work is involved. So I want to talk a little bit about that conversational process automation. And so now you know what I mean when I talk about that. Intelligent automation, that work is where I use machine learning models and data-driven decisions to add some cognition or some level of intelligence to the assistant. So whatever process I'm automating or providing to the client, I am teaching the assistant to be intelligent based on data. So I can look at patterns, I can look at anti-patterns, I can be predictive, and I can do lower cognitive type work using AI and machine learning to get the work done. So to take the easy, repeatable stuff away from the human, or the easier decisions away from the human, and have my assistants do that work. Everybody puts automation in everything, and I'm not very fond of the word automation because it makes it sound like it's rules-based and repetitive. And when you start injecting intelligence, it's not really automation. It can be one-off. So I wanted to say even beyond automation. So if you go down to the next slide, that was my slide 2. So if you go down to the slide where I say machines can think, see, learn, understand, hear, move, that slide, I just wanted to give you an approach that we use to think about work. So if you take any business process that you're trying to deliver or, to provide, you can break that process down into what I call SOPs, standard operating procedures. And every single one of those, the first time I look at the process, I say, okay, what does that SOP require? Does it require my eyes? Does it require that I need to learn something and reuse it and recall it later? Do I have to understand? Do I have to hear something to do that work? Do I have to, be very thoughtful and use data to do the work, have knowledge? Do I have to physically move things? Do I have to provide insight or act? So you can see, if you look at it that way and you start applying this digital innovation to every single one of those standard operating procedures, we start using machines to do human-like behaviors. So if I need to see something, I may use OCR or I may use smart imaging. So for instance, one of the things I've been working on is we have a customer who has large items in a field. Imagine big trucks, trains, cylinders that contain all kinds of various things. And instead of sending a human out to do the inventory, we'll send up a drone. We'll take a snapshot in the morning, and with smart vision, we'll compare the field, the picture in the morning to the picture at night, and we can tell them what inventories moved that day. So what has changed based on that picture from the drone from the morning to the evening? So that might be, that's a great example of how we're using seeing as a way of helping our customers do their work. Learning, we create, for instance, we can take structured and unstructured data and put into what I call a knowledge garden. And I call it that because it goes in, the knowledge goes into, it could be a data lake, it can be a database, a corpus, whatever you want to call it. But over time it learns, because as you use the data, you're teaching it through machine learning, and it grows over time. So things that computers are very good at are looking at large amounts of data. So we use expert systems to access that data, and then we use human natural language to ask questions of that data. And for instance, a human doesn't have to read all the newspapers in the world, but we can download those every day. Not in the world, I shouldn't say the world, but newspapers, many use newspapers. We can download that input, and then we can give that person natural language query access to that information for their work without them having to read that data. And that's why these expert systems are so good in medicine. No doctor can read all those manuals, or in financial services, because there's just not a stockbroker alive that can know everything about the content of these companies that they're researching for their customers. So that would be an example of where we learn. Speech recognition is where my passion is right now, conversational AI. Our language is so complex, and building these assistants, do we build it to be a male or a female? Do people respond better to a male or female? Do we try to match our virtual assistant to the human calling? So like if you speak quickly like myself, do we want to have a virtual assistant that speaks quickly? Or if you're from the East Coast or West Coast or young and old, to making these virtual assistant voices match the persona of the person, does that result in better results or make the customer more delighted? So working on these things and trying to get these systems to sound less robotic and more human-like is where I'm spending a ton of my time right now, building these conversational voice virtual assistants. And we're seeing a lot of this going on in the contact center space. So we spend in the customer servicing space. We're displacing a lot of IVR systems and allowing people to speak naturally what their need is in the way that they want to speak. And then if our systems are built properly, we can glean that intent and understand the intent that the customer is intending to get help with, without them having to push 1, 2, 3, some limited static set of options. So it's very dynamic, and you can speak naturally. So that's where we're spending a lot of our time. That's the hearing, the speech recognition. I'll go on just in the, I have about 10 minutes, and tell me if there's questions, because if there are, I would love to take them. So if you'll look in the chat for me. I was going to talk to you, I almost feel embarrassed talking about what's beyond RPA, because I know we haven't even scratched the surface of RPA, to be honest. And a lot of these innovations you can see on my slide that has the Forrester artificial intelligence technologies from Q1 last year. I wanted to draw your attention to the most disruptive emerging tech trend. The second most right now is the automation of knowledge work. And so I was blown away by these numbers, what we're estimating for labor productivity and what we're estimating for economic impact. And so automation of knowledge work includes RPA and many of the other things I keep talking about. But I think each one of these technologies that you see on this AI technology curve, you have various, there's a really good article this woman wrote, and I could get you the reference. I can't remember her name right now, and I can get you a reference and a link, but she talks about 5 steps of innovation. So you have your, and I think of this for what we're doing with RPA. We have an innovation trigger, right? It's introduced, I would say that's many years ago, it's introduced and everybody's aware of it. So that's the first step. Second step, you have this peak of inflated expectations. So I would say a lot of these intelligent conversational systems are in that peak, right? So the second step would be this peak of inflated expectations. The third step is this trial of disillusionment. And this trial of disillusionment is where I think a lot of people are in RPA right now, because they went out, they prototyped, they realized it's not probably as easy as they thought. It requires that a lot of care and feeding. It's not one and done. You got to keep these things running. And to get the real value, you have to, stand up some type of care and feeding. I almost think of it like a child. You don't just put a bot out there and walk away and think it's gonna, not have any exceptions or not to be upgraded or maintained or whatever, the care and feeding of them. So that would be your third stage where I think we are. So this is where the work becomes a reality, right? And we all know it's not easy. So we go from pilot, we move it into production, and then this is where we have to scale it up and we have to industrialize it. I think we're getting ready to go into this slope of enlightenment, which is the next phase. And the following phase is the plateau of productivity. So with RPA, we're starting to see some really great numbers, as we all know, where we're adding huge benefit to our clients. So now that we're hitting what I call that slope of enlightenment and getting to the plateau of productivity, we're starting to say, okay, now how can we improve? What's next? So now can we add natural language to these assistants? Can we put the human in the loop so they can speak naturally, or we can pop up a report so the human can make a cognitive decision, and then this process goes on its way. And I think that's where we are. And I think a really cool way to think about it is the automation of the knowledge worker. So how can we bring that knowledge to the knowledge worker and automate as much, take the bot out of the human as much as possible? And that's where we are. And we're, they're projecting huge numbers over the next few years to do that. So if you pop down one more slide, these AI technologies are things that we use to try to automate the knowledge worker, right? Where I was talking about computer vision and I was talking about machine learning, and I thought it was a good description for you in the middle to describe the things we might do, and then the illustrative capabilities of how we apply these AI technologies. So this is all about automating or using technology or digital disruption, I call it, to do human-like behaviors and take the easy stuff away from the human and use that human to do the higher cognitive or the more complex work. So that kind of brings you full circle on where I think this is going. If we have any questions, I want to take those. Diana, was there anything else you wanted me to be sure to cover? Other examples of work or?
No, I think, Nicole, can we open it up for questions?
Sure, there's a question and answer or a chat box that attendees are able to use. The chat box and the Q&A, I believe, are both down at the bottom of their screen.
Yeah, please feel free to use that if you have questions, because I've got a few more minutes and I would love to take the questions. I could give more examples of my work that might be interesting, or let's see if. Okay, well, let me just, since I have about 5 minutes, I'm going to leave you with something else that always makes people think. And it's a trick that I have used throughout my career, and it's helped me tremendously. It's biomimicry. And I've been kind of talking about that with copying the way humans hear, see, feel, think. You know, we can do things with sentiment analysis, affective computing for how you feel, etc. One of the coolest things I ever got to work on is we had a shipping company who was having trouble with theft. So pirates take over ships, cargo ships, usually coming from China to the United States, full of containers, and pirates take over these ships, and it's very lucrative for them to do that. And these ships have, you know, fuel is affects their ROI tremendously, their profit. And so one of the things that really taught me a lesson was this to pay attention to what happens in the natural world. So that's where I'm talking about hearing, seeing, feeling. What we did as a team is we thought about how animals move in packs. And we started thinking about the way geese fly. And we were thinking about patterns in nature that might be able to be applied to shipping to help us. And we came across this thought, which is crazy. We use design thinking. So you get a room of very diverse thinkers in a room. And I mean, I'm talking true diversity, maybe very non-technical, but gives different ideas. And that's how you get these great ideas. As we started thinking about the way geese fly, and we applied that pattern to the shipping, which reduced the drags of the boats. So they saved on fuel and it increased their security. So they had less issues with pirates. And we did that by thinking about the natural world. So I think people always think technology is just computers and bits and bots and just metal and, you know, semiconductors and so forth. I think we need to get out of that world and think more about our natural world and patterns and things that we can use and leverage to add value to our work. So I think there's a ton of value in sentiment analysis. You know, I've used it in the contact center space where I could tell you if a customer is mad when they're calling or confused, and you would never upsell or cross-sell to a consumer who is mad. But the minute they start using words that I know through sentiment analysis are telling me that they're happier, they're content, they're satisfied, I will see that based on the words they're using and you know, automating my systems to look at those words and tell me the customer's sentiment. At that point, then you can upsell and cross-sell. So that's one way to use sentiment analysis. Or you can try to use sentiment analysis to find if a customer's confused, and you may decide this person's confused, just get them right to a human agent. Don't even try to work with them through technology. They're frustrated right now. So that's one way. So I want to leave you with the thought that think about the natural world and biomimicry and things that we do and try to apply that to your work. And it gets really interesting when you start thinking of it that way, with seeing, hearing, learning, feeling, and applying that to the way we get our work done. And that it tends to make my work much more interesting. Any questions? Because I do have a hard stop in a minute. No questions, not even one. You guys, I'm really active on LinkedIn. This is Sherry Combs at Deloitte. You can contact me via my Deloitte email, scombs@deloitte.com, if you have any questions. But if we don't have any, then maybe I'll let you go ahead.
Nicole, did you have something?
No, I was just waiting to see if there are any questions coming through.
Cool.
All right. Well, Sherry, thank you so much. We know you're moving and shaking across the U.S. So we really appreciate you being able to spend some time with us. And Sherry is being completely truthful in that if you do have any questions or want some additional information on the concepts that she just presented, please reach out to her. Also, you guys have my name since I'm one of the co-chairs for the Atlanta chapter, Diana Sweetwood. Please feel free to reach out to me as well, and I can get you to Sherry.
Cool. Good luck, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.